Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 84 of Camera Position, a podcast about the creative side of photography. As I've mentioned in past podcasts, I get a lot of mail, I get a lot of email, and I'm usually really happy to have email in my inbox, especially when it comes from photographers. And I got a great email not long ago from a guy named Jerry Downs, who's a photographer in California, and the subject heading of his email was Interesting Visual Friends. Interesting Visual Friends. And I loved the subject heading of the email. In fact, it wasn't an email at all. It was an invitation to connect on the social networking site Facebook. And I have a lot of friends on Facebook, and my friend list is growing daily, and Jerry and I now are Facebook friends. A photographer I previously did not know anything about, and whose work I'm now getting to see on a regular basis and able to communicate back and forth with him. And what I began to think about was how this contact via Facebook and other contacts that I now have through Flickr and Twitter and other kinds of social networking experiences, and certainly the podcast and the blog page for the podcast, those kinds of things have really changed the way I deal with the photography world around me. And I'm actually taken back to my days in art school. And, way back when the wonderful thing about being in art school was the ability to have a bunch of like-minded people around with whom to interact, bounce ideas off of, take a look at a stack of photographs and say, what do you think? And get an honest response. An honest response based on the fact that those other people were all engaged in the same process of looking at pictures, making pictures, thinking about pictures, and thinking about how to get those pictures better, make them better in a variety of ways. So Jerry Downs and his Interesting Visual Friends prompted me to begin to think about how important it is for us to have those kinds of connections, because even if you're out there listening and you didn't get a chance to go to art school, you didn't get a chance to have those kinds of experiences in your life, the ability to have these interesting visual friends out there in the world now, many of whom you will never meet face to face, but the ability to have those people in your life through Facebook, through Twitter, through Flickr. So I'm hoping that those of you who are out there who are interested in getting feedback from your work are engaging yourself in these social networks. And certainly I'm on Facebook, Jeff Curto on Facebook, and it's actually facebook.com/CurtoJ. Somebody else has Jeff Curto, sadly. And also on Flickr at Jeff Curto and Twitter at Jeff Curto. So, and I'll put links to this on the cameraposition.com blog page so that you can also check that out. I've also made a Facebook group for Camera Position. So if you're already on Facebook, go ahead and join up with the Facebook group, and that's a way that we can get to know one another a little bit better and be able to communicate back and forth a little bit more than we are able to on the blog. I've also created a Flickr group for Camera Position, and I think this might prove to be really interesting. If you are on Flickr, if you have a Flickr account, you can post pictures to the Camera Position Flickr group, and we'll have a kind of a stream of those people who are out there listening to Camera Position, who I assume are mostly photographers, and hopefully we'll have a sort of stream of images that those of you who are out there making pictures are producing, and we can kind of take a look and begin to have commentary on one another's work. So this idea of interesting visual friends, I'm really fascinated by the notion that we can create friendships, we can create relationships online through these social networking sites. And I have to admit that I have met as many photographers and interesting visual friends through the online universe than I have really in a long, long time any other way. And of course, one of the ways I've met people is through the Photocast Network, a kind of loosely knit group of other photography podcasters, including my friend Martin Bailey, who has this to say.
Hi, I'm Martin Bailey, a photographer based in Japan, and I run a weekly photography podcast and blog that I know you're going to love. I explain my techniques, thought processes, and the artistic decisions behind my images, all illustrated with my own real-world examples. Search for Martin Bailey Photography Podcast in iTunes or visit martinbaileyphotography.com for links. See you there.
So there's Martin Bailey, and I know that some of you probably already listening to Martin's podcast, but he's a photographer I never would have known of, except for the fact that he does a podcast about photography that I've been listening to for a long time. He does a great job, and because he and I periodically collaborate on a podcast called The Focus Ring. Some of you may know about The Focus Ring, where a number of the photographers from the Photocast Network, who are podcasters, get together and talk about photography and the way photography is practiced. And it turns out to be like sitting around a table with a bunch of photographers whose company you enjoy and having a chat about photography and a way photography is practiced. It's a little bit complex in terms of getting us together sometimes. I wasn't on the last Focus Ring episode because I wasn't available. It's sometimes a little tough to get everybody together when Chris Marquardt lives in Germany and Martin Bailey in Japan, and Abarian X Perillo, who lives in Los Angeles, and John Arnold in England, and I'm in the Chicago area. So sometimes it's tough for us to all find a common time, but through the miracle of Skype technology, we're able to have a great conversation, and I hope you're able to tune in to the Focus Ring podcast. I think one of the things that is important to recognize when we look at sometimes the way photographers compete with one another and try to get better photographs and try to get better scores and try to get into the same exhibition spaces and so forth and so on, that we all really are engaged in the same process. We're all really trying to do the same things, and we're all trying to accomplish the same goal of getting better all the time and trying to do a better job at making the images that we want to make and have those images communicate in a variety of different ways. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, was the idea of these interesting visual friends, and hoping that you're connecting up with interesting visual friends all over the world and using some of these wonderful tools to do that with. While I've said that, though, I think it's important to note that sometimes getting together physically with people is a really good idea. I often get together with other photographers physically to talk about photographs, and certainly that's what I do in my classroom and my day job as a photo teacher. But there are also a number of other great opportunities out there for being able to connect up with other photographers. And I wanted to point out one of them that is coming up really soon in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am a member of the Society for Photographic Education, and we are having our annual conference coming up March 4th through 7th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And another link I'll put on the cameraposition.com blog page is to the SPEnational.org website, where you can get more information about the conference. But imagine a conference where there are 1,500 or so photographers, primarily interested in the art of photography, interested in looking at your work, interested in showing you their work, presentations by a number of really, really great photographers, and presentations about learning photography, presentations about doing photography, presentations about the ideas behind photography. So I'd strongly encourage you to attend at least a day of, if not the entire conference, of the Society for Photographic Education. Now, you don't have to be a member to attend the conference, nor do you have to be a photo educator. There'll be lots of students there, but there will also be lots and lots of people who are not photo educators, not currently enrolled in photo education programs, etc., etc. There's also a big trade show where there'll be representatives from all of the big camera companies and some of the retailers and so forth and so on. So come on to the Philadelphia National Society for Photographic Education Conference. I think you'll have a great time. One last piece that is worth mentioning here, and I'll talk about this more in an upcoming episode of Camera Position, but we are now taking reservations for this year's Italy workshops. I'm very excited that we're ready to go on taking these reservations. In fact, I've already started taking some reservations, and there are a few seats left in the Italy workshops that are coming up. We have one workshop in Rome for 3 days, 4 nights and 3 days of photographing in Rome, trying to tell your story of Rome. We'll talk about editorial process. We'll talk about storytelling. We'll talk about the way in which we can use images to help us tell a story. And then we'll move from Rome to Tuscany, to the wonderful town of Pienza, and we'll spend a week in Pienza and other towns around there in the hill towns of Tuscany, trying to see if we can look at our own personal vision and figure out that editorial process of editing down the take of images to the ones that are most our own. How do we develop our own personal visual style? So take a look at photographitaly.com. I'll be talking a little bit more about this in an upcoming podcast, but if you're interested in attending, we've still got a few spaces left, and I would love to have you come along with us. Thank you for listening to Camera Position. I really appreciate everybody who's out there listening. I appreciate those of you who feedback to me about what you like and what you don't like. If you have a chance to go over to the iTunes store and feedback over there and rate the podcast and maybe even leave a comment, that's always great because it helps place the podcast in the iTunes store, and that helps us get more listeners, and that helps us build a bigger network of interesting visual friends. So thanks again, and I look forward to talking to you on a future episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com